Hey, lizard people. So let's talk a little bit about bearded dragons and glass surfing. So glass surfing is a commonly seen behavior where bearded dragons run around their tank, bouncing off the glass walls of their enclosure. Though this is common, it's often a sign of something off with your bearded dragon's habitat, which can easily be corrected with some simple steps. So before we jump into glass surfing, I'd like to ask you to like this video, comment below, and subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you around for future videos. So what is glass surfing? Glass surfing is the owner's term for a specific behavior with bearded dragons. Despite the name, you may see this behavior in tanks without glass walls, although sometimes the reasons are specific to glass tanks. When glass surfing, the bearded dragon appears to desperately want to escape the tank. Also known as glass dancing, bearded dragons will scurry around their tank and attempt to climb the walls of the enclosure. The reptiles rub its belly on the wall to get a grip while its arms are waving frantically. The bearded dragon will also stand on its hind legs to give it more height in its attempt to escape. With this behavior, the bearded dragon may just stick to one wall and climb repeatedly or move around the tank on multiple walls. So some of the reasons behind this behavior are going to be that the enclosure could be too small. If you're sharing space with another bearded dragon, which we don't recommend you do, maybe it's in a new space or new and have new or rearranged furniture. Your pet could be hungry. The temperature could be too low. It could be seeing its reflection and getting confused, or it just can't see the glass. So one of the reasons that they glass surf is because the enclosure itself is too small. Bearded dragons are active creatures and need a lot of space for all of their normal activities, such as digging, climbing, basking, hiding, and resting. If the space is too small, they can't burn off enough energy properly, and they begin to seek other ways to use it up. So we recommend adult bearded dragons use an enclosure of at least 50 gallons large, and 75-gallon tanks or more would be preferred if they have to share space with another reptile, which is we throw that out there because some people do this regardless of the advice out there, but we highly recommend, not putting them in any enclosure with another reptile. So on that subject, let's talk about sharing space while we're at it. Another reason a bearded dragon may glass surf is if they share a space with another dragon. These creatures are territorial and they don't enjoy being cooped up with one another. This is especially true for dragons that are close to the same size. So our advice is to never keep more than one male in an enclosure if you have to do more than one. If there's a size discrepancy, the larger reptile will challenge and dominate the smaller one. Often in these situations, using glass surfing as a means of escape from the domination and abuse which usually occurs. Make sure you don't keep more than one bearded dragon in an enclosure. Is really the best option. And if you do have to keep similar size one in an enclosure, make sure it's not very long. Try to be the best owner you can, and don't force one to live in a space where it's going to have a terrible life. Really, it's really try to avoid doing this. So a dragon will often glass surf in a new space. This is instinctual because they have learned to fear unknown things, including new spaces. Glass surfing is common when bearded dragons are moved to a new enclosure, even as a baby or juvenile. It's just instinctual. No matter how much you make the tank look and feel like the Australian desert, it's never going to be a perfect match. So you can try, but it's not going to happen. So. And there will always be some adjustments whenever you introduce them to a new space. Glass surfing happens a lot after switching, to that new space. So just give them time. Give them time to adjust and be patient. If they don't seem to calm down on their own, some calming tactics, which we'll discuss later, might help. So believe it or not, even changing the position of furniture or getting new furniture is enough to set off this sensitive bearded dragons. In this case, furniture refers to any items or objects in the tank. It's going to be basking rocks, hammocks, anything. Drastic changes can make the enclosure feel like a brand new tank to them, and then you'll see the same problem with glass surfing you see when switching to an actual new tank. So try not to change things too much or too fast if possible. Dragons are creatures of habit, and they like their homes to stay as much the same as it possibly can. So another reason that you may see glass surfing is out of hunger. So As the reptile gets more and more hungry, and if it's not getting the food it needs, its instincts tell it to go and search for this food. So since they can't really go out and search from their tanks, and it's really hard for them to see the glass, so their natural response is going to be to escape by climbing the sides, or they're trying to run and search for food, and it's going to basically end up glass surfing. So always be sure you are adjusting the amounts of food you feed them as they grow. The rule of thumb is to feed them as much as they can eat within roughly 15 minutes. If you're worried about overfeeding them, this comes from feeding them too much protein or feeding them too often. So, bearded dragons naturally live in the deserts of Australia. Because of their natural habitat, their bodies need a lot of heat and UVB from the sun to survive. Naturally, if the temperatures of their home is too low in the wild, they go and search for somewhere warmer, or they go into brumation, kind of like a hibernation. But in captivity, if they're already brumated recently, they will desperately go in search of warmer temps by climbing and escaping the tank. The running around also helps them slightly raise their body temperatures as well. So not only is heat needed for good health, but it also helps them to digest their food. So always make sure your tank has proper temperature set up. You'll have a cool side of your tank and a warm side of your tank. And make sure you're using thermometers and hygrometers to track the temperatures, and check them at least once or twice a day to make sure that everything's set up properly. So another reason that we see a lot from bearded dragons glass surfing is because they're confused by their reflection, and it's kind of amusing, or funny when they do see their reflection, but it's an easy fix. If you're using a glass tank and the walls are clear and clean, your bearded dragon may see its reflection and think it's another dragon. So as we discussed earlier, these dragons are territorial and they don't like to share space. So when it sees its reflection, it gets confused about if it's a new dragon in their area, and they may attempt to challenge it or challenge their own reflection. So this really doesn't solve anything. The easiest solution here is to use a background on the walls of your tank, or even cover them if you can. Somehow to cut out the reflection that they might be seeing. Or whatever you can do to prevent that. Another reason that they might glass surf is because they just can't see the glass. They might see something outside their enclosure and they want to get it, so they run towards it, and they just can't see the glass in front of them, or they don't understand why there's this barrier in front of them, and they'll continue to run. And they'll continue to. They're trying to attempt to get through it, and they'll keep running and running against this invisible barrier. If you notice your reptile is climbing up against the same wall over and over, this may be what's happening. The simplest solution is, again, to add a background against the wall or remove the objects the bearded dragon is trying to go after. So here's some quick tips for how to stop glass surfing. Check the size of your tank. We recommend between 50 and 75 gallons. Remove any other dragons or reptiles to another enclosure, and then check the temperatures. So around 105 degrees Fahrenheit for basking spots, an overall temperature of 90 to 95 degrees. Their hide spot should be somewhere between 70 and 85, and at nighttime, somewhere between 60 and 65 degrees. So some additional tips for stopping glass surfing are going to be to check for their diet and look for the frequency of their feeding frequency. And as well as the type of foods you're feeding them. Adult dragons should have about 30% insects and 70% vegetables. They get feed, and these are only after they're adults. So then you'll have where one day you feed them nothing but protein, the next day nothing but vegetables, and then the third day you'll take no food at all for the adult dragon, and then you'll repeat that process. Then another way to stop surfing is going to be cover the glass walls with a background if needed. Try to calm down your dragon, remove anything stressing them out, give them a bath. If you have built a bond, maybe handle them a little bit, stroke their head, something like that. Get them out on an adventure, bring them back, something to help them get to calm down. And then give him time to get used to a new enclosure or furniture if that's something that you've done. And this could take between 1 and 2 weeks. So if you notice some of these other behaviors in combination with glass surfing, you may want to take your pet to the vet just to be safe. These things can be frothing at the mouth, lack of appetite over long periods, visible injuries, persistent hiding, or lack of movement. So now you know why your bearded dragon is glass surfing and how you can stop it. Most of the time it's caused by the presence of another reptile or something wrong with their habitat. So luckily these are easy fixes when it comes to glass surfing. Just go through the checklist we mentioned earlier to see if any of those are what's causing your problem. But even as funny as it may seem to see them do this, glass surfing does need to be avoided to prevent injury to your pet dragon. If you want to learn more about bearded dragons and how to be the best owner possible, check out my digital handbook in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel to see when we release a new video. Thanks.